There is a great debate out there in the world today, and that is whether China is truly a great threat to the United States or whether it is really just a paper tiger, that so much of its military might, so much of its industrial capacity is really kind of fake. And we're going to go into that a little bit because I really think it's so important for us to understand how great of a threat China really is. When we start looking at the numbers of manufacturing capabilities, in the end, you have wars that are fought not so much by the troops at the end of the supply chain, but rather by the supply chain itself. If you can't make the tanks can't be at the battlefront. If you can't make the artillery shells, then the troops on the front lines run out of shells. If you can't make the things that the troops will need, and that's what we're really seeing right now, is this battle between Russia and the NATO military complex. And we're already seeing that Russia can outperform, in many ways, what the NATO countries combined can do. And I promise you this, when it comes to Russia versus China, China has way more industrial capacity, and they're rapidly adding more. It's worse than you know. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade. Hopefully you've been having a good week. I have my family in town. We're spending a lot of time together, so sorry that the video was late this morning, but Steve Poplar needs to sleep, and Steve Poplar is having a great time with some of his family members in town, and it's great catching up with family I haven't seen in a while. All right, so how bad are things really? First off, let's just get the elephant, let's address the elephant in the room. Chinese production is, by and large, not as high quality as the United States. I think anyone who's been to the Dollar Tree or the $1.25 tree knows this for a fact. You buy cheap Chinese junk, it tends to break. You buy electronics, we haven't had access to Chinese cars in the U.S. market, but everybody around the world knows that cheap Chinese vehicles are less reliable than the American, less reliable than other countries' cars. But all that to say, it's interesting that people around the world still buy the Chinese vehicles. Why? Because they're so much cheaper and they're reliable enough. And in Central Asia, we had Tongans. And they used to use Russian vehicles all the time. And then they got these cheap Chinese vans. And oh man, just everybody had these cheap Chinese vans because they were cheap and they worked well enough. You may not know this, but 32.3% of global car production is now Chinese made. So if you go around the world and you pick a random car, 3 random cars, one of them is going to be Chinese made. That's massive. That's 3 times more cars than the United States makes. When you start looking at buses, trucks, you see very similar type numbers. This is huge, friends. When we get into a war with China, which I say not if, but when we get into a war with China, they're going to be able to build 3 times more tanks than the United States. Like that. They can make 3 times as many armored vehicles right off the bat. And that's assuming that this is a direct correlation between production they have now and capabilities, right? And that's not necessarily true because the Chinese have been building car factories. The United States is, not really building car factories. And that's one of the things that we're going to see across the line here is that China's moving in the right direction. The United States is moving in the wrong direction. The United States is closing down factories while China is opening factories. Many of the factories that were, as we talk about manufacturing capabilities, if you've been in an American factory, it's not unusual to see machines that have been operating for decades. Whereas you go to China's manufacturing and you'll see machines that are relatively new. And that's a big deal. The facilities, the buildings that this production is taking place in. And when we start talking about manufacturing capability, this is also another really big thing that nobody talks about. Let's just look at the raw numbers and then we'll get into kind of what's going on with this. So if we put all of Europe together in the car manufacturing capabilities, they produce about 15% of the world's cars. So combined, United States and Europe, all of our car production, which you think would be more than China, is less than China. About 26.5% of the world's production is all the European cars, all of American cars, versus the 32% coming from China. All right, so overall manufacturing. Overall manufacturing, China produces about 31.6% of the world's goods. Now that's by dollar value. United States is about just under 16%. So China basically has twice the production that the United States does. Now that's bad. That's bad. The fact that they could produce, 2 USA's worth of manufacturing is very troubling. But when you start looking at what they manufacture, here's the thing. United States manufactures whatever will make money. China has been like, we're going to go to war, so we want to particularly invest in manufacturing things that, one, the world's going to be dependent upon us on, like pharmaceuticals. It's close to 90% of the world's pharmaceuticals are made in China. Now, they're not necessarily assembled in China, but the precursors for antibiotics are almost exclusively made in China. And then you start looking at other, and we're not talking about like some of the designer stuff, right? But a lot of the base stuff is manufactured in China. Sometimes it's repackaged in India, sometimes it's repackaged in Europe, sometimes it's repackaged in the United States, and then it's kind of made in the USA. And that's something that's, when we look at the manufacturing in the United States, we're going to see that a lot of manufacturing in the United States is fake manufacturing. We're taking the components, it's kind of like the IKEA factories, okay? We're taking the IKEA parts come in and then American workers assemble whatever it was from other countries or add just a little bit just so that we can say it's made in America, and then it goes out on the shelf. So you look at Walmart and they say, over 50% of the products on the store shelves at Walmart, while everyone calls it China Mart, over 50% of the products on the Walmart shelves are made in America. But you scratch beneath the surface and you'll see much of that is more like assembled in America and the parts came from China. And that's something we kind of, in our guts, kind of understand. But not only is the manufacturing targeted at defense-oriented things that the world is dependent on, but then also, and the fact that the United States has a lot of fake manufacturing, but then you have this other thing where it's bulk. The United States assembles things that are expensive. China assembles a lot more things, right? And so when you start doing things like comparison by weight of products, when you do comparison by numbers of products, China starts blowing us away dramatically. They make lots of cheap stuff, right? Whereas the United States makes specialized equipment, makes computerized things, and the vehicles that the United States makes and the aircraft that the United States makes. We make big ticket items, whereas China makes lots of small stuff. When you look at boomsticks, China outproduces the United States in boomsticks. When you look at capabilities to produce munitions. China drastically outpaces the United States again. You look at drone manufacture. Almost all drone manufacturers, civilian drone manufacturer, is basically a Chinese made. When you look at these dominant technologies that will be so critical in World War III, you see that China blows us away. Shipbuilding. Let's just do shipbuilding by tonnage, okay? China produces 49% of the world's ships by tonnage. 49%. Okay, well, where's the United States land? 0.2%. Not 2%. 0.2%. They produce 250 times the ship capacity, tonnage, than the United States does. 250 times. Now, I know that a lot of surface combatants out there are basically just targets. But hear me out. Chinese ships that are rolling off the docks, all sorts of bulk carriers, all sorts of cargo ship container carriers, all sorts of tankers, so many of these ships are being produced by China. And many of them are being flagged as Chinese flagged ships, which are required to essentially be able to be called up into duty by China. They can field a massive fleet of civilian ships that would dwarf our capacity to sink them. Let that sink in what I just said. We make super smart, super expensive bombs and super expensive missiles that we don't have enough of to sink all of the ships that China has. We would have to ramp up production of our smart missiles and smart munitions in order to have enough munitions, assuming every single one hits a Chinese ship, to sink the Chinese fleet. We don't have enough munitions to take out their ships. Now, I'm not saying that would be a pretty fight, that would be awfully ugly on their side, but they don't even have to beat us. They can just absorb their losses as they come at us. That's one of the things where people are like, oh, well, China couldn't invade Taiwan, it wouldn't work. They could just keep coming until the Taiwanese just run out of bullets. They can do that. And people don't get how lopsided this is right now. And it's getting worse by the day. 49% of the ships in the world are produced by China. 0.2% by United States. So they're making ships that could be like transitioned over to being warships. They produce massive amounts of vehicles that could be armored vehicles or tanks very shortly. They produce 3 times more products. When it comes to raw materials processing, they produce way more than the United States, especially things like rare earth minerals. They produce essential things while the United States produces things that are cool. Entertainment. We produce luxury goods while China is producing all the things necessary for life. Okay? Toilets. Who makes toilets? China makes toilets. United States? Nope. Plumbing. China makes the plumbing. You look at basically all the stuff you need and you go, it's all coming from China. And that's not by accident. That's purposeful. China has been intentionally making the world dependent upon them. We cannot stop importing the stuff from China because it's the stuff we need. They can stop importing stuff from the United States because they don't even need it. They don't really import much from us. And over the long haul, China has been very dependent upon countries like Germany, particularly Germany, because their manufacturing facilities require specialized machinery. And they have been, up till now, unable to produce this specialized machinery very efficiently or very well. And so they've been buying German manufacturing machines that are what they operate in their facilities. But of course, they've been backwards engineering these manufacturing machines, and more they are producing these manufacturing machines themselves, which really cuts the string between them and Germany. And Germany, you see the German economy starting to tank a little bit. And part of that is because there are less orders coming in from China for their manufacturing machines. Then finally, I want to end with this big one. Steel. The United States produces 80 million metric tons of steel per year. China produces over 1,000 million metric tons. They produce over 13 times the amount of steel than the United States does. And that right there should tell you basically all you need to know about how lopsided the manufacturing capabilities of the United States versus China really are. The situation is serious and it's getting worse by the day. China is smiling today because while they in some ways are still behind, we're talking about stuff that's on the water, Navy-wise. The United States has higher quality, but China is rapidly building its quantity and they're working hard to up their quality. And they're moving forward. The United States is stuck where it is. We're very slowly moving forward with quality, and we're slowly moving backwards with quantity. China is moving forward with both. When it comes to World War III, if it is going to be a conventional war, already China has way more options. They can put missile batteries on every single one of their civilian ships, and we wouldn't have enough missiles to sink all of them. They can produce missiles much faster than we can. They can produce missile batteries much faster than we can. They can produce new ships much faster than we can. And they can build tanks, armored cars, all of these things, and weapons for their soldiers. Heck, they have more soldiers than we do. That's something that's really going to come out in the coming years. And people who are not really taking China seriously at this point, they're going to give us a bloody nose one of these days, and it's going to get ugly. And I believe that that may be closer than a lot of people realize. All right, friends, I just want to keep you up to date on what's going on out there. Make sure that you're hearing what's really going on, not just the fake stuff from the mainstream media. All right, friends, thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of The Poplar Report out.